"Get her out of the house," said Lady Prescott to her maid in a hiss that carried the length of the cold morning passage. "I don't care where. The linen closet, the still room, the far end of the county, anywhere the Duke will not lay eyes on her. He arrives at 3. She is not to be in a single room he enters. Do you understand me? Not one." The Duke of Jervane, who had arrived at 2:30, stood unannounced in the open doorway of the hall behind them, gloves in his hand, and heard every word. He had come a half hour early on purpose. He always did. It was one of the few advantages left to a man in his position, the power to arrive before he was expected and see a house as it truly was, before it arranged its face for him. He had learned, in a weary decade of being hunted across 3 counties for his title and his fortune, that a household unaware of his eye told him more in 5 minutes than a week of managed dinners ever would. And Rossmore Hall, seat of the late Sir Edmund Prescott, had just told him a great deal. It had told him that there was a her, whom the lady of the house was frantic to conceal, and that this concealment, whatever its cause, was the most interesting thing that had happened to the Duke of Jervane in a year of tedious bride hunting. He stepped back, silently, into the porch, and rang the bell as though he had only that moment come, and gave the whole household the courtesy of 30 seconds to fly into its arranged positions. The Duke of Jervane was not in the ordinary way a curious man. He was 39, grave and privately exhausted. His godmother, the Marchioness of Ely, had bullied him into this expedition, a slow progress through the eligible houses of the north, to look over their daughters and at last, God willing, to choose a bride, for Jervane needed an heir and the Duke needed, though he would not have put it so, a reason to come home to his own great empty house. He had looked over a dozen daughters already. They had all been the same daughter, painted, prompted, playing the harp with terrified precision, laughing at his jokes a half-second before he finished them. He had come to Rossmore expecting the 13th of these, and he had found instead a mystery in a cold passage, and he was, for the first time in the whole dreary business, awake. He was received by Lady Prescott, a handsome, hard-faced widow of perhaps 45, all warmth on the surface and calculation underneath, and by her 2 daughters, Miss Arabella Prescott and Miss Sophronia Prescott, the elder in blue and the younger in pink, both curtsying to the exact depth their governess had drilled, both smiling the drilled smile. They were not ill-looking girls. They were merely, entirely, the 13th daughter again. "Your Grace does us such honor," Lady Prescott purred. "We are only a small, quiet family since dear Sir Edmund was taken from us. My daughters, my only treasures, you must let us make you comfortable." "You are very kind," said the Duke of Jervane, and bowed and thought, only treasures. She had said only, and in the passage she had said her. A small, quiet family with a hidden member. He filed it away behind his grave, courteous face, and allowed himself to be shown to the drawing-room and given tea and made the audience for Miss Arabella at the harp. He endured the harp. He endured the dinner, at which he was seated between the 2 Prescott daughters and talked at by their mother, and at which a place, he noticed, because he noticed everything now, a 4th place at the family end of the table had plainly been laid and then hastily cleared away, a faint ring of a wine-glass still marking the cloth where no glass now stood. He endured the evening. And all the while some part of the Duke of Jervane's grave attention was elsewhere, moving through the great cold house after a person he had not seen, following the small evidences of her. The cleared place. A book left face down on a window-seat in the passage. A good book. A real one, not the drawing-room kind. A shawl, plain and much mended, forgotten over the back of a chair in a room he was steered quickly past. And once faintly, from somewhere above and away, a few bars of a song sung low by a voice that did not know it was overheard, a true voice, untrained and unafraid, nothing like Miss Arabella's terrified harp. The Duke of Jervane went to his bed at Rossmore Hall more intrigued than he had been by any woman actually presented to him in a year. He did not sleep. Near midnight, restless, he did a thing dukes are not supposed to do in strange houses. He took a candle and went quietly down to find that face-down book on the window-seat, meaning only to see what a hidden woman read. The passage was dark and cold. He found the window-seat. He did not find the book. He found the woman. She was sitting in the dark on the window seat with her knees drawn up and her plain shawl about her shoulders, looking out at the moonlit park, and she had not heard him, and for a moment before she turned, before either of them spoke, the Duke of Jervane stood in the shadows with his candle and simply looked at her. She was perhaps 23. She was not painted and not prompted and not arranged. Her dark hair was down for the night in a plain plait over one shoulder. Her face in the moonlight was grave and fine and quietly sad, and it was, he thought, without in the least meaning to think it, the most alive face he had seen in a year of dead ones. Then she turned and saw him and went very still. "You are not meant to be here," she said, not a question. She did not scream or simper or flee. She only stated it, and there was in her low voice a terrible, weary certainty, as of someone long accustomed to being the thing that was not meant to be anywhere. "You are the Duke, and I am not to be in any room you enter. So one of us is in the wrong place, your Grace, and I begin to fear it is I, as it usually is." But he did not leave the window seat at once, that first night, though he had said good night. He stood a moment longer in the cold passage with his guttering candle, and Marian, who had risen as if to signal that the strange interview was over, found that he had not quite gone. "You said there were things I did not know," he said. "About your life here. Tell me one of them. Not all, I have no right to all, but one. I should like to carry away one true thing from this house, since the household is so determined to send me off with none." Marian hesitated. It had been so long since anyone had asked her a question about herself, expecting a real answer, that she scarcely knew how to give one. "Very well," she said at last, drawing her shawl closer. "Here is one. There is a room at the top of the west stair, a small room, cold, that was the schoolroom when my mother lived. It has a window that looks east, to the sunrise, and a shelf of my father's books that my stepmother has forgotten, or does not think worth removing, and a chair by the window with the stuffing gone. I go there every morning before the house wakes. I read an hour, and I watch the sun come up over the park that was my mother's and my father's and is held in trust for me and does not feel in the least like mine, and then I go down and I become what I am the rest of the day, which is no one. That is the true thing, your Grace. For 1 hour a day in a cold room with a broken chair I am myself. The other 23 I am the flaw the house keeps out of sight." The Duke of Jervane was quiet a long moment. "I have a room like that," he said, "at Jervane, a great house, 40 bedchambers, and I live, when I am home, in one small bookroom off the library where the fire is always lit and the chair is worn to my shape, and I would not trade it for all the state apartments in England, because it is the only room in the place that does not expect anything of me. The rest of the house is full of what a duke is supposed to be. That one room is the only one where I am permitted to be a man." He looked at her, and there was in the moonlight a kind of recognition passing between them, the startled recognition of two people who have each believed their particular loneliness unique, and have just discovered it shared. "It seems we are neither of us at home in our own houses, Miss Prescott. We keep to the cold small rooms and let the grand ones stand empty, and let everyone else believe we are the fortunate ones. It is a strange way to live." "It is the only way I have been given," Marian said. "Yes," said the Duke. "It was for me also until quite lately, when I began to wonder whether a man might not simply refuse it, whether a house might not be made to expect nothing if one filled it with the right person, so that one need not flee to the small cold room at all, because the whole of it had become the small warm one." He seemed almost to be speaking to himself. Then he collected himself and bowed gravely over her hand, a real bow, the bow one gives a lady, which no one in that house had offered her in 4 years, and he said, "Thank you for the true thing. I shall carry it away as I promised. Good night, Miss Prescott. Watch your sunrise tomorrow. I find I like to think of you having your 1 hour, whatever the rest of the day does to you." And he went at last, his candle bobbing away down the dark passage, and Marian stood at the window seat holding the hand he had bowed over as though it did not quite belong to her, and did not sleep at all that night, though for once it was not misery that kept her waking. She was at her window in the cold schoolroom before dawn, as always. But this morning, watching the sun come up gold over the park, she found that she was not, as she usually was, entirely alone with her 1 hour. For there was a man somewhere under this same roof who knew now that she had it, and who had said he liked to think of her having it. And it was astonishing, she discovered, what a difference it made to a solitary hour to know that a single soul in the world was, perhaps at that very moment, thinking of you kindly. She had not known such a thing in 4 years. She had told herself she did not need it. She discovered, watching the sun, that she had been lying to herself, as thoroughly as her stepmother lied to the world, and for the same reason, because the truth was too dangerous to be let out where it might be used against her. "On the contrary," said the Duke of Jervane, "I begin to think you are the only person in this house who is in the right place, and everyone else is in the wrong one. Who are you?" She considered him a moment in the moonlight, weighing, he thought, whether the truth was worth the trouble. "Marion Prescott," she said at last. "Sir Edmund was my father. Lady Prescott is my stepmother. Arabella and Sophronia are my half-sisters, whom I love, and who are not unkind, only young and led. I am the daughter of the first wife, the one no one mentions, and the house is mine, or it was my father's and would have come to me, had he not died before he could change his will back. So that now it is held for me until I marry or come of full age, and my stepmother manages it and me and everything, and would greatly prefer that I did neither." She said it flatly, the whole miserable sum of it, staring out at the park. "You are not to see me because a plain, penniless-seeming stepdaughter of no charm is thought to spoil the market for 2 dowered daughters in blue and pink. She has hidden me at every gathering for 4 years. Tonight you were the prize, and I was the flaw to be swept under the boards. It is nothing to trouble your grace. It is only the shape of my life. You should go to bed." The Duke of Jervane did not go to bed. He came and sat down on the far end of the window-seat at a proper distance and set his candle on the sill between them and said, "Tell me what you were singing, earlier, from above stairs." She looked at him, startled. "You heard that?" "I hear a great deal, Miss Prescott. It is nearly my only skill. I have spent a year in houses where every woman is arranged for me like a dish, and I have learned to listen past the arrangement for the one true thing in the house. And tonight the one true thing in this house was a book left face down that a real person had really been reading, and a plain mended shawl, and a voice singing above stairs that did not know it was heard and so did not lie. I came down to find the book. I have found something far better." He paused. "So, the song." And Marion Prescott, half disbelieving, told him. And then, because he asked, she told him about the book, which led to another book, and to her father who had loved books and taught her Greek and Italian before he married again and grew quiet and died. And the grave, exhausted Duke of Jervane, who had not had a real conversation with a marriageable woman in a year, sat on a window-seat at midnight with the flaw the house had swept under the boards and talked with her until the candle guttered low of books, and of grief, and of great empty houses, of which they discovered they each kept one, her small and hers only in law, his vast and his only in title, both of them rattling about alone inside a life other people envied. "You are not what I expected of a duke," Marion said at last, low, as the candle failed. "And you," said the Duke of Jervane, "are not what your stepmother expected of a flaw." He rose. He looked down at her in the last of the light, at the grave alive face and the plain plate and the mended shawl, and he made, quietly in that cold passage, the decision his godmother had sent him north to make and that a dozen managed dinners had failed to produce. He said nothing of it. It was too new and too much, and she had been made to feel unwanted quite enough for one lifetime. He would not add to it the weight of a duke's sudden regard thrust at her at midnight, but he had decided. "Good night, Miss Prescott," was all he said. "I am glad the household failed. Sleep well." He was, the next morning, a changed guest, though only Lady Prescott, watching him with a hawk's unease, sensed it. He was courteous still and grave still, but the weary indifference was gone. He asked, at breakfast, pointed questions about the family, about the late Sir Edmund, about the estate and its management, and Lady Prescott's tea grew cold in her hand, about whether there were not other members of the family he had not yet had the pleasure of meeting. "Only my two treasures, your grace," Lady Prescott said too quickly. "As I told you, a small, quiet family." "Curious," said the Duke of Jervane, buttering his toast with great composure. "For I could have sworn on my arrival yesterday I heard mention of a third young lady of the house, a Miss Marian, was it, the late Sir Edmund's daughter by his first marriage. I understood the estate is in fact held in trust for her." He looked up, mild and terrible. "I should so like to meet her before I go. It would grieve me to leave Rossmore having overlooked its true mistress." The silence at the breakfast table was profound. Miss Arabella in blue had stopped with her cup halfway to her mouth. Miss Sophronia in pink was looking from her mother to the Duke with dawning, dreadful comprehension. And Lady Prescott's handsome face had gone through several colors and arrived at a rigid, brilliant, cornered smile. "Marian is indisposed," she said. "Delicate, she keeps to herself. I would not dream of troubling your grace with—" "You mistake me," said the Duke of Jervane, and set down his knife, and the small click of it silenced her utterly. "It is no trouble. Indeed, I must insist. Send for her, Lady Prescott. I find I cannot in conscience choose a bride from a house until I have met every lady in it, and I have quite made up my mind to choose a bride from this house before I leave." He smiled gravely into the widow's whitening face. "You did say you wished to make me comfortable." "Nothing would make me more comfortable. Send for your stepdaughter." Between that midnight and the breakfast at which he would insist upon meeting her, the Duke of Jervane laid his siege with a soldier's patience and a diplomat's care, and Lady Prescott, who was no fool, understood within a day that something had gone gravely wrong with her arrangements, and could not for her life discover what. The Duke was courtesy itself. He praised Miss Arabella's harp and Miss Sophronia's watercolors and Lady Prescott's table, and he stayed on. He had been expected to stay 2 days, and on the second he let it be known with grave regret that the state of the roads and the charm of the company obliged him to trespass upon their hospitality a little longer. Lady Prescott, torn between triumph and unease, could hardly object. A duke lingering was precisely what a scheming stepmother with 2 marriageable daughters most desired. And yet, he asked questions. He asked at dinner in the mildest way how long the family had held Rossmore, and to whom it would descend, and whether the late Sir Edmund had left other children. And each time Lady Prescott turned the question aside, and each time the Duke let it be turned, and smiled, and asked another an hour later, coming at the thing from a new direction, the way a patient man works a locked drawer. And he watched. Marian did not know she was watched. The household had grown so used to not seeing her that no one thought to warn her to hide better, but the Duke of Jervane saw her everywhere. In the small evidences the house could not quite scrub away. He saw her hand in the one bowl of flowers in the whole grand cold house that had been arranged by someone who loved flowers rather than someone who arranged them for effect. He saw, walking the grounds, a single narrow path worn across the dew-wet lawn from a side door toward a stand of old trees, the path of a person who walked alone, early, every day. He rose early himself, the 3rd morning, and stood at his window, and watched a gray figure cross the lawn along that path in the first light, and stand a while under the trees with her face turned up to the sun, entirely alone, entirely unguarded, and the Duke of Jervane, who had come north to choose a wife from a lineup of prompted daughters, stood at his window and understood that he had already chosen, that he had chosen on a window seat at midnight, and that the whole remaining question was not whether he wanted her, but how he was to reach past a stepmother's guard to a woman so thoroughly hidden, and so thoroughly convinced of her own unworth that she might not believe him even if he stood before her and said it plainly. He would have to say it plainly. He saw that. Half-measures would be read by both women, the schemer and the hidden one, as something they were not, by Lady Prescott as a passing fancy to be flattered and steered toward her daughters, by Marian as a kindness that would fade with the fright, as all the kindnesses of her life had faded. No. When he moved, he would move completely in the open before witnesses, so that there could be no mistaking it and no undoing it and no quiet burying of it after he had gone. A duke had, he reflected, very few real powers that were worth the having, but the power to say a true thing out loud, in a room full of people who wished it unsaid, and to make it stick simply by being who he was. That power, for once, he would spend, and gladly, and on the only thing he had found in a year of searching that was worth the spending. So he waited and watched, and let Lady Prescott turn aside his questions, and let her believe she was winning, and chose his ground. And on the evening before the breakfast that would undo her, he sought Marian out one last time in private, not to declare himself, for that he had resolved must be public, but for a plainer reason. He found he could not bear to spring it on her cold before the whole family without one word of warning, for she had been ambushed by that household too many times, and he would not, even in her rescue, ambush her again. He found her in the west schoolroom at dusk, where he had guessed she might be, and she rose in alarm at the sight of a duke in her one private place, and he said quickly, gently, "Do not fly. I will not stay. I came only to tell you one thing, so that tomorrow will not take you wholly unawares, for I think you have been taken unawares by this house often enough. Tomorrow at breakfast I mean to ask to meet you formally before your family. Your stepmother will not wish it. I mean to insist. I tell you now in private, so that when it comes you will know it was not a whim of the moment, and so that you may have your one quiet night to prepare your face if you need to prepare it." He paused at the door. "That is all. I keep my promises, Miss Prescott. I said I would carry away one true thing from this house. I have changed my mind. I find I do not wish to carry it away at all. I find I wish to stay where the true thing is. Good night. Watch your sunrise. Tomorrow, I think, the house may look a little different to you." And he was gone before she could answer, leaving Marian Prescott alone in the darkening schoolroom with her heart going like a struck bell, and a hope so large and so long forbidden rising in her that she hardly dared to breathe, for fear that breathing might scatter it, as everything good in her life had always, sooner or later, been scattered. They sent for her. There was nothing else to be done. A duke had insisted before witnesses, and Lady Prescott's whole art was the art of surfaces, and a surface cannot refuse a duke to his face without shattering. Marian came down not knowing why she had been summoned. She had dressed plainly, as she always did, in gray. No one had troubled to tell her the duke had asked for her by name, and she entered the breakfast room braced, as she was always braced, for some fresh small humiliation, to be sent on an errand perhaps, or displayed briefly as the poor relation and dismissed. She saw her stepmother's face, chalk-white and furious. She saw her half-sisters, wide-eyed. And she saw the Duke of Jervane rise from his chair at the head of the table, rise, for her, to his full grave height, as a gentleman rises for a lady of consequence, and she stopped in the doorway, utterly at a loss. "Miss Prescott," said the Duke, "I am glad. I feared they should hide you from me again." "Your Grace," she managed, "I do not. Why have I been sent for?" "Because," said the Duke of Jervane, and he came around the table toward her, past the frozen stepmother, past the gaping daughters, and he stopped before Marian in her gray gown and looked at her as he had looked at her in the moonlight. "I came north to choose a bride. My godmother sent me. I have visited a dozen houses and been shown a dozen accomplished young ladies, every one of them arranged and prompted and painted for my inspection, and I have not wanted a single one, because there was no truth in any of it, and a man cannot marry an arrangement. I came to this house expecting the 13th of them. Instead, I heard your stepmother, in the passage, order that you be hidden from me, that you not be in one single room I entered. And I confess it made me want, more than I have wanted anything in a year, to enter every room in this house until I found you." He glanced once at Lady Prescott, and his grave voice cooled to something that made her flinch. "It is a rare thing, madam, to try so hard to conceal a treasure that you point out precisely where it is buried. I am obliged to you. You have saved me a great deal of tedium." He turned back to Marian, and the grave Duke of Jervane, before the whole appalled family, did a thing that undid 4 years of her invisibility in a single stroke. He took her plain, ungloved hand and bowed over it, and kissed it, as a man kisses the hand of the woman he means to make his duchess. "I sat with you on a window-seat at midnight," he said low for her now, though the room hung on every word, "and we talked of books and grief and empty houses, and it was the first true hour I have spent with a woman in a 12-month, and I went to my bed having already decided. I did not tell you then. You had been made to feel unwanted too long. I would not have you think a duke's regard was one more thing being done to you without your leave. So I am telling you now in the open, where no one can hide you from me again, and where you are free to refuse me before witnesses if you choose, which is a freedom this house has given you and nothing else." He straightened, still holding her hand. "Marian Prescott, I do not want a treasure that was arranged for me. I want the one that was hidden, the true mistress of this house, whom everyone overlooked and I nearly missed. Marry me, not to spite your stepmother, though it will gloriously. Marry me because you are the only real thing I have found in a year of searching, and I have no wish to go on searching, and I have no wish to go home to my great empty house alone one day longer than I must." Marian Prescott stood in the doorway of her father's breakfast room in her gray gown and looked up at the Duke of Jervane, and for a long moment could not speak at all. 4 years of being the flaw, the poor relation, the thing swept under the boards, and now a duke stood before her family holding her hand and calling her the true mistress of the house and the only real thing he had found. It was too large. Her eyes filled. "You will forgive me," she said unsteadily, "if I do not quite believe it. I have been the unwanted one so long that I—" "Then let me be very plain," said the Duke, "so that belief costs you nothing. I love you, Marian. I have loved you since the window seat, which I own is indecently soon, but I am 39 and have wasted a great deal of time on arrangements and have no more to waste. Say yes, and you shall never again be hidden in any passage of any house on this earth. Say yes, and I shall spend the rest of my life ensuring you are the first person seen in every room you enter." His grave face gentled entirely. "Say yes." "Yes," Marian whispered, and then on something between a laugh and a sob, "Yes." Lady Prescott made a small sound, like a kettle taken suddenly off the fire, and sat down. They were married that autumn, and the Duke of Jervane's godmother, the Marchioness of Ely, pronounced the new Duchess the finest thing her difficult godson had ever chosen, and adopted her on the spot. Society, hungry for the tale, spread it far and wide. How the great Duke of Jervane, hunted for a decade, had come to a northern house to choose among 2 dowered daughters, and had instead chosen the hidden stepdaughter the household had tried to sweep from his sight, and how the hiding had been the very thing that revealed her. It was told at 100 dinner tables, and improved in the telling, and the Duke did not mind, because every version ended the same way, with Marian beside him. As for Lady Prescott, she was not cast out, for Marian would not have it. She had a soft heart even for those who had used her hardly, and her half-sisters she loved outright. But the balance of Rossmore Hall shifted overnight and forever. The estate that had been held in trust came, upon Marian's marriage, fully into her own hands, and thence into the ordering of a mistress who had learned every corner of it from the underside. And Lady Prescott, who had ruled it as a stern regent over a hidden heiress, found herself the guest, on sufferance, in the house she had governed, humbled not by cruelty, but by the plain reversal of a truth she had spent 4 years trying to smother. Arabella and Sophronia, freed of their mother's scheming, grew genuinely fond of the half-sister they had been taught to eclipse, and were dowered and settled kindly by the Duke, and never forgot that the sister they had once helped to hide had, when she had the whole power in her hands, used it to lift them up. And every year on the anniversary of that first cold visit, the Duke of Jervane came home early, a half-hour early, unannounced, as was his lifelong habit, to see his own great house as it truly was before it arranged its face for him. And every year he found the same true thing waiting in it that he had found at Rossmore, a real book left face down where a real person had really been reading, a voice singing low above stairs, unafraid, and on the window seat where the last of the evening light came in, his Duchess, no longer hidden from anyone, the first person seen in every room she entered, waiting for him to come home. "You were too late," she said to him once, teasing, drawing him down beside her on the seat. "That is what they say now in the telling. Her stepmother wanted her gone before the Duke arrived, but she was too late." "She was too late," the Duke of Jervane agreed, and gathered his wife against him as the light went gold across the park. "By half an hour. I have never in my life been so glad to have come early." And he kissed the top of her dark head and did not let her go, and outside the great house that was hers and his and no longer empty, the evening came softly down.